So, Dan, when we're looking at Worcestershire's journey towards net zero, there's obviously emissions relating to how we heat and lighten the power that we use on our homes, industrial energy, and but also the energy that we use for just getting around day to day. Now, I understand that you've used a system called Shift to encourage people to take more active transport. Could you just give me a little bit of an overview, first of all, by what we mean by active transport, and then if you could tell me a little bit about the Shift program, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so, well, my understanding of active travel is for short journeys, largely. Let's suggest less than 5 miles. There's certainly the ability for more people to make more of those journeys, either by walking or on scooters, electric scooters or bicycles or e-bikes, rather than using motor vehicles. There's lots of benefits to that. Obviously, the energy efficiency of someone cycling 5 miles that's using far less energy than a single occupancy motor vehicle. There's added benefits then to personal health and well-being, physical and mental health. There's air quality, there's noise. It's a safer mode of transport. So yeah, lots of benefits. And I work for a company called Aquabio. We're a small engineering company, probably about 40 people, based just outside of Worcester. We tend to we do water reuse and water treatment projects for factories. We tend to take a year to build a project and a year to then get it handed over with the client. And previously, our marketing was largely writing an article when we successfully handed over a project and send that to the industry press. So it wasn't particularly sort of dynamic or blue sky thinking marketing. About, I think it was 2016, 2017, I was involved in the marketing side of the company. I sort of pitched that perhaps we should be marketing based on the company's values and what we do, services we offer, as opposed to what we build. There's a bit of a subtle change in the direction there, and we came upon this idea that at the time there was probably 5 or 6 people commuting to work by bike, and that fitted in quite nicely with the sort of the green side of the business, which effectively is cleaning up dirty water and allowing it to discharge to water courses or reuse that water. So that seemed to fit quite nicely. So out of that then came, well, why don't we promote cycling internally at Aquabio and see if we can get some more people to make short journeys by bike as opposed to car. And we came up with the Shift scheme. So we had a little competition internally, came up with that name, which the acronym is Sustainability and Health in Future Transport. But it's all about the acronym, really. Shift
yes.
Sounds, isn't it? So the idea of Shift then is that for every kilometre that any employee does on their bike, the company donates 2.5 pence to charity. And we just pitched that, and it was interesting to see what happened. For the first couple of years, that money went to Sustrans and Cycling UK, and then it's gone to the local cycling advocacy group, Bike Worcester. And I think the interesting thing was there's 2 interesting things. One is how that then affected the business, and 2, how that then affected employees. In 2016, before Shift, we did about 25,000 kilometres, and I think there was about 6 or 7 people contributed to that. And we did a gradual year-on-year increase, and then last year we did over 60,000 kilometres, with 28 people contributing it. So as far as how it's affected Aquabio as a business, it's been a complete change to how we think about transport, both commuting to work, which is the main one. We also do a fair amount of work on site, and invariably now when people do go and work on site and are commuting from site to the hotel or wherever they're stopping, they'll be taking bikes with them there. We often arrive at meetings in different cities on bikes, where we've now taken the train and then do the last bit on a bike, as opposed to driving places. So it's quite a dramatic change, and it's a bit of a culture change within the business. And then from a personal health point of view, it's been great. And I think particularly with lockdown and people having more time, there's been people are probably doing a bit more leisure cycling, but also running errands on bike. And we've got some younger people working here, but we've also got a lot of people in their 40s and 50s, and we've got, there's a couple of seasoned mountain bikers who would go out at weekends on a mountain bike, but wouldn't necessarily use a bicycle as a mode of transport. And we've managed to shift those into that.
I think that's really interesting to tap that kind of sports angle as well, because quite often there's people that do take parts in two-wheel sports at the weekend, but haven't thought of actually using the bike as a vehicle for commuting, even though, as you say, there may be fairly short journeys that are easily commutable. So that's very interesting, actually. I hadn't sort of considered that might be an option where you could get people that were just doing it for sport also to convince them to use it as a tool for commuting, really.
It's been interesting. That wasn't really the intention. It was almost a bit of an experiment when we set it up. But undoubtedly, that I think is a success story, that we've gone from going back to 2013. We were probably down at less than 10,000 kilometers cumulatively, and so that's over a six-fold increase. Pretty interesting, and it certainly seems to be something that could easily be rolled out to other businesses. From a business perspective, it's been interesting as well, because we have used it for marketing, just on the basis of that good news story. And quite a lot of traction for that. It's also interesting that our sales team, it's often something that they talk about, during the initial discussions at a sales meeting with clients, because again, it's a nice thing to talk about, that this is the business is doing, going beyond and above what they need to do to function as a business. But then interesting, there's other spin-offs. I mean, when we sort of occasionally enter awards for the work we do, and there's usually some sort of bit of information that they're after about, well, tell us about Aquabio, what else do you do? So it's always nice to put on that. And then we've even got extra points during health and safety accreditation schemes, where again, quite often now there are questions that are asking about employee health and well-being. Do you have any for that? So it's been quite surprising over the last maybe 4 years, just as to how we have, as a business, operating almost, are you getting value for money for the money that you spend? I think it has been valuable. Is assisting in a number of different areas, and it's great when we've got new starters and new employees, that we tell them about that, and we say, the company also supports the Cycle to Work scheme. So I was
going to ask about that. Yes, because that's an obvious way in as well. And what would a company have to do to implement the shift scheme? Is there anything specifically that's required? I'm imagining obviously somewhere safe to put a bike would be a starting point, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so interestingly as well, we have managed to persuade some other Worcester employers to take it up. So I think there's three companies now that are doing are using the shift scheme. I mean, it's not a dedicated brand, or there's no signing up fee or anything like that. It's just a concept and an idea. And I think there may be some of the local authorities have certainly shown interest in it. I don't think any of them have launched it yet, but there was talk of Worcester City, Witch Haven District Council, Malvern Hills District Council, that were going to use it for their employees. And unfortunately, the whole COVID thing got in the way a little bit with that. I'm hoping that does happen. And I think if those local authorities did do that, I think they'd probably be the first in the UK to have a genuinely cycling incentive scheme, an active incentive scheme. So it would be great if that did happen. I guess it will do at some point. It's just about time.
Yes. Yeah.
So as far as what does a business need to do to implement it, I would suggest they need some advocates internally within the business, probably people that are already getting around by bikes. They probably need to have a chat with their marketing team and the marketing director and see if they could persuade that to happen internally. I mean, initially it's almost zero cost because it starts with a pledge that the company would donate a certain amount of money per kilometre. So once you've got that advocate internally, I guess they would then be the person that would be sort of collating the statistics. So what we tend to do is everyone's got a Strava account, and once a month I tot up, maybe takes 15 minutes just to go through and check what mileage everyone has done in the last month. So there's a need for that, and then talking about it and shouting about it, and whether that's on social media or internally, and just tracking those statistics. I think
I'm very interested, and it's kind of a common theme that's come through when we've talked about any of the subjects on these podcasts, that there does need to be this advocate within an organisation, whether it's for energy saving and implementing energy efficiency, or identifying different ways of doing things which maybe saves carbon. And it seems like on the active transport side, it's no exception. I'm very interested that you use the data from Strava as well, which is a phone-based app, isn't it, which is popular with cyclists and runners and climbers. I think there's probably a climbing Strava, isn't there, which records various statistics about how far you've gone and what times you've done on certain stretches of road. So yeah, that's interesting as well. So we kind of covered what would happen on a company's premises, if you like. So they make that start without any kind of capital involved. What do you see as the barriers at the moment to greater uptake of active travel, be that walking, cycling, or scooters, or whichever method is chosen?
Yeah, but I think, well, if you take, so my patch is Worcester City, it's quite a good example, I think. I think probably the first barrier is habit. And I'll put my hands up. I've lived in Worcester for 20 years and I've worked at Aquabio for 18 years. It's about 5 or 6 kilometres outside of Worcester. And yeah, for a fair amount of time, I used to drive to the office every day. It took some colleagues that went cycling around the world, cycle touring, to make me think, well, if they can do 60k or 100k a day, I'm sure I could cycle to the office. So
yeah,
that's the start of my journey, and that then turned into cycling to the office in the summer, and then I bought a decent jacket and some lights and cycled through the winter, and then it ends up to the point where I make an effort now to not use my car. I still got it, but for journeys in and around Worcester, it's the first choice is the bike. So I think habit is probably the first biggest barrier. We're then into quite a long-winded answer as far as what
it's okay.
There are a lot of perceived barriers. One being that even if you take Worcester, that it's too hilly. I don't think it is, from my experience, and so I'm fast approaching 50, and albeit reasonably fit, but reasonably fit because of the active travel. I think there's but there's I don't struggle at all getting around Worcester with regard to hills. Another one is often pointed out that it's the British weather. I've been logging statistics on my commute to work as to how often I get soaked or damp or not wet at all, and in actual fact the times I get soaked, I think, is less than 2%. Soaked being you've got so wet that you need to change your clothes and get the towel out when you arrive. Quite often it's raining, but it'll be very light rain. If you're sat in a car, it might look like it's raining more because you've got your wipers. It might be quite dark, but in actual fact, when you're on a bike, sometimes you don't even notice it. And even then, that would be less than 5%. But the perceived barrier of the weather is a problem is certainly there, and I think getting over the perceived barriers is it's important that we acknowledge that these barriers are there, and it's important then that we try and help people get over them. I think a lot of adults will have not ridden a bike since their childhood, and often it's perceived that by some people that a bike isn't a mode of transport, it's a toy used by children. That's to get over, but I'm dancing around the issue. I think probably the biggest barrier to more active travel is lack of infrastructure, and that's then something where there's a need to convince politicians, and then for the politicians to be instructing council officers to real proactive change to our road network, our transport network, such that there's a perception that cycling is safe. And the only way to do that really is to have segregated cycle routes, and which isn't shared with cars and isn't shared with pedestrians. And then there's a lot of words used around what those cycle routes need to be. So they need to be comfortable, they need to be continuous, they need to be intuitive. It needs to be a comprehensive network, as in it doesn't, it's not just one cycle route on one road and then it disappears. And there was government guidance that came out last year, I think, LTM 120, which it goes into great detail on what good quality cycling infrastructure is. Because
sometimes you do see some oddly thought out cycle paths, don't you, where there might be a piece of street furniture in the middle, or a kind of a blind spot where you're going to join a main road. And sometimes cycle paths do feel a bit tokenistic at times, and take you off a direct route to send you kind of round the houses to bring you back on, which might not be too useful for commuting and things. So do you think framing it kind of in net zero, and you think now there's more interest, and it's a good time to be looking at some of these schemes again?
I absolutely think it's a brilliant time to be doing it. I think on the back of COVID, which essentially is a respiratory disease, I think that's a good time to be doing it. I think it's really about joining the dots and having a coherent message. The benefits to active travel, are broad, and that message needs to be shared. And I get the sense as well that some employers may take the view that how their employers get to work isn't their employees get to work. That's not their issue. So again, it's perhaps with the net zero thing that does give opportunity to encourage businesses to think beyond.
Yeah, that could be covered perhaps by their sort of scope 3 reporting as well, which is where they have to look at the kind of imported or exported carbon that they're doing almost by proxy through their suppliers, but also through, as you say, how their staff arrive at that premises each day. Yeah,
and again, it's like you touched on earlier with regard to providing a scheme that incentivizes and encourages active travel. And it's not, the shift scheme at Aquabio isn't just about transport to work. It is about how people use transport in their personal lives as well. And it is only a nudge. It's not insisting that anyone does anything, but it's a nudge for a more sustainable, more efficient and healthier mode of transport. Now, we as Aquabio with 40 employees, we may still not have the resolution to determine whether that is a benefit to individuals' health, but the evidence suggests that it should be, and that should be a benefit to the company. So it goes a bit beyond the day-to-day operations of a normal business. But again, I think a lot of businesses now are thinking more about their employees and work-life balance. Again, working from home thing has completely transformed a lot of people's lives as to how they consider work, and probably in some instances maybe the first time that they've questioned how they get to work and the time wasted sat in a car, sat in traffic jams.
It's definitely interesting point. And also there's a lot of focus on electric vehicles because they're the sort of high tech and everyone's interested at them at the moment, but they don't really address the traffic jam issue, do they? Because a traffic jam of electric vehicles is not really any better for personal mobility and for society as a whole than, if they were internal combustion engines. I mean, it's better for carbon and air pollution, but in actual getting around, it's still a traffic jam at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I've got an electric car, and it's in actual fact it's the biggest and heaviest vehicle I've ever owned. So from an efficiency point of view, I am assuming using more energy than in its purest sense. It might not be, that energy may have been generated sustainably, but it's still using an awful lot of energy. And if I make a journey on a bike as opposed to in that vehicle, that energy is available to be used elsewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it's really, I think it's really important when we're talking literally in this case journeys to net zero, that we don't have a kind of a blinkered approach just to what's in the news at the moment, and that we cover all aspects, and especially something like active transport, which has knock-on benefits as well, and sort of safer city centres, both in terms of air pollution, but also in terms of just safer for people and nicer environments as well. In terms of how modal shift could be funded, do you have any ideas or thoughts on that? Whether it might be something like a car parking levy with some ring-fenced funds from that a local authority sets up, something like Nottingham did, for instance, or if it's through some other method of local taxation, or an employer gets a discount for having bicycles for staff to use, or something like that. Do you have any thoughts around that at all?
Yeah, well, I think they're all perfectly viable and good ideas. I think as a society, whether that's locally, nationally, globally, I think we need to decide where we want to be. If there's a genuine desire or demand that we are gonna, which I believe there is from a carbon emissions point of view, that we need to decarbonize transport, and we need to be serious about this. And so that absolutely needs funding. Where that funding comes from, whether that's central government through general taxation or locally, we've drastically underspent on particularly cycling infrastructure in the UK for decades. So it does need a big investment. And if we are trying to promote and incentivize active travel, somehow we have to make all public transport. Yeah, somehow we have to make single occupancy car use less attractive, and I think that has to be via, the only really viable way of doing that is to make it more difficult to drive, whether that's making parking more expensive or it's a carrot and a stick, isn't it? But I'd much rather, not from a selfish point of view, but wouldn't it be wonderful if there were tax breaks based on the miles you did on a bike?
Definitely.
Perhaps the carrot is a better method, but
yeah,
whether that's done nationally or locally, and how that's done, and whether it's incentivized or whether it's through the system of grants for building cycling infrastructure. It isn't just about building cycling infrastructure, it is also about positive communication via national and local media. And I mean, it's interesting with the shift scheme, no one asked us to do that. That is genuinely Aquabio as a private business setting up a scheme which is fundamentally donating money to charities to promote active travel. So that is potentially another source of funding.
Yeah.
But I think to make it happen quicker, that perhaps needs to be via central or local government. Yeah,
brilliant. That's brilliant. Thanks ever so much. I really enjoyed that, and obviously I do a bit of cycling now and again, and we tested the Woo bikes as well. So yes, if we can get anything going, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And I think as we were talking before, wrapping it up in the whole net zero agenda, I think is the way to certainly go at the moment. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for your time there. So thank you to Danny there. That was a really good summary of the project that they've been doing at Aquabio to encourage their staff to make use of different transportation options to get around. And I think it's one of the things that's really important, that when we talk about transportation, the focus is very much being on the electrification of transport. But that's just one of the many of the options that we've got to decarbonise that particular area. And we should also be looking at active transport and decarbonisation of public transport more fully as well. It's really interesting there that for the shift scheme in particular, that there isn't a very large capital outlay for that. And I quite like the competition element for who can do the most commuting miles over a week, and the charitable benefit as well. That seems like a really good scheme, and be very interested to see if that can be rolled out more widely across the county. So continuing with our theme of low carbon and active transport, I'd like to welcome along to the podcast someone who has a depth of experience in bicycle share schemes and an electric bike scheme at the university. So over to Katy Boom from the University of Worcester. Welcome, Katy.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me along, Alex. So in my role as Director of Sustainability at the university, we've been working on a number of ways to encourage more sustainable transport for our staff and students. And for many years, we've had a bike share scheme for staff. It's very affordable. It makes it, and for students, we charge a very small fee. And we've got a fleet of around 100 bikes. 50 of these are pedal bikes, 50 of these are electric bikes. And once a membership fee of £45 is paid, then for an academic year, members will get a free helmet and a free set of lights, and then they can take the bikes out. The way we do it is we allow members to have a pedal bike for up to a week, then they've got to return it, so we kind of know it's safe and hasn't wandered off. And then they can take out as many bikes as they like throughout the year. And with our e-bikes, it's a 24-hour period because we need to get the battery back for it to be recharged. We have a small fine. We're kind of used to that because, we have library fines and things. So if you don't bring it back when you're supposed to, there's an automated thing that just reminds you, and you get a little fine, which is more expensive for the e-bikes.
I suppose
that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, you have to do something to encourage people to do the right thing and make sure that those electric bikes are available for other people to use as well. And what was the sort of impact on the students, Katy? Because I remember you telling me something about students that needed to get to work placements. Was the scheme used for that as well?
Yeah, and we had a lovely, so we do, I've got two lovely little stories around that. We had one student who is a trainee teacher, and he was actually an avid cyclist, but he was also a father and just a new dad and super tired from his child waking him up in the night. So he used an e-bike, whereas normally he would have cycled on his own pedal bike. But he just needed that extra oomph to get him to his placement, which was in Herefordshire. So it was quite a cycle, but as I say, so that's one where having access to an e-bike supported one of our students. Got another student who does a part-time job as a carer. So she's also a student here, but does some part-time work. And she normally, when you're doing the 15-minute appointments, the care providers ask for essential car users, but this student used her e-bike, and so she could easily nip between appointments. So those are two little stories where having the e-bike was helpful as opposed to just using them.
Yeah. That's a fantastic sort of a real use case example there, and solving a genuine problem, in terms of affordability of vehicles for young people as well. If we're going to move over to electric vehicles, they do tend to be more expensive. And until sharing options are more widely realised, electric bikes and bicycles are going to be the transport choice.
Yeah, we're still looking. So if there are any care providers out there who are interested in working with the university, we can help for you to recruit amongst our students, because, there are issues around that at the moment. And I'll definitely be supporting any student that has passed your training that isn't a car user but wants to use a bike instead. Being very, very happy to talk to anybody.
That's fantastic, and really good that the university's taking the lead there and making these bikes available to the students. What about the wider sort of business community in the city of Worcester, where you're based? Are you doing anything with businesses there?
Yeah, we were super fortunate in getting some funding from the local government association. So working with Worcester City Council, the idea is taking the learning and the practice that we've learned from having a bike share scheme on campus, and we're looking to extend that and offer bikes to employers in the city. So the idea of this project is to give them access to electric bikes and also bikes with a trailer. So we've got some trailers that you can pop onto the back of the e-bike, and also we give access to an e-cargo bike. So the idea for this is, if there is a business in the city that for their business travel, they move between places. Now, I'm not talking about takeaways, those kind of business. It's more like maybe if you're an estate agent and you're going out on doing home visits, or perhaps a pharmacy going out delivering drugs, those kind of things. So if you're interested, we've got a project that is currently live at the moment within Worcester City, and we will support you on that. And again, we use students, and we've got students who will help do a marketing campaign and help embed it amongst your staff. So that's for your business trips, but we'll also give you access to the bike so you can use that for commuting. So if you've got members of staff, so the assets are being used overnight and then also during the day. And if there's anybody listening to this from, I can't guarantee this, but we're after another smidge of funding to work. We get an opportunity. What we want to do is see if this is a replicable idea. So, and see if we can share the learning in a different location. So we're after another small pot of money just to see if we can do a communications campaign in a different location. Because what is novel and different about this bike share, which I hadn't mentioned yet, Alex, is it's very affordable. It doesn't need the same kind of infrastructure that you see with the bike shares in the big conurbations like the West Midlands Combined Authority or the long-standing one down in London. So this, the electric bike, the batteries are swapped over. So you don't have to have any charging infrastructure. Bikes can just be stored on a normal, the
Sheffield
all over the city. So it's a very, very affordable way of introducing that. But there are sponsorship opportunities. So if businesses are listening to this and interested and want to support with that, then
I think it's really interesting because not many people realise that we have a scheme in the city of Worcester, and there may be other of the districts that are looking at doing bicycle schemes of a similar kind of vein. So if you have a model that can be replicated, that's going to save people quite a bit of work as well, isn't it? And I'm glad you raised the finance side of things, because this is one of the interesting things, isn't it, that someone has to pay for these schemes, and it's difficult to charge enough for the service to make some of these schemes financially viable. So sponsorship opportunities and other things have to be looked at as well. And I suppose at the end of the day, it may well come down to what price do we put on clean air in inner cities and lower carbon?
Yeah, and obviously there is the initial cost of purchasing, the assets, but a lot of the day to day is around collecting and moving the bikes and who maintains them. And our Worcester model, we employ a charity, so we work with Spokes, who are an arm of the Emily Jordan Foundation, and they work with people with learning disabilities. So the whole model of the Woo bikes is based on not only it being economic and affordable, but we're also providing social value back in the local community.
Yeah, that's a fantastic angle, and there is those opportunities for social enterprises, as you say, isn't there? And community benefit companies as well. If you were to kind of look at the perfect scheme, if you like, what would that look like? I know that's a bit of a mean question, but what sort of key blocks would you like to see involved in the perfect cycle scheme or electric bike scheme? What sort of things would we be looking at?
Okay, so my perfect scheme has a long-term sponsor that would support it through the ups and downs of a bike share. I'd also look to want to, where we extend this model of using some social enterprise charity where there is some other value for either moving bikes around in the health and safety checks on them. And I'm a university, so really we've got to have students involved in this model. So students are excellent at helping with behaviour change projects. They're so inventive and very good at social media and communication skills. So my model also offers opportunities for students to both volunteer within a scheme as well as an earn as you learn element. So it wraps up all those economic, social and environmental impacts of sustainability. But so any business that wants to tick all those three boxes, reduce carbon, help with air quality, all those are so difficult to prove causality. And, even a fleet of, 500 bikes will be very difficult to impact and measure whether we...
Yeah. I think it's the measuring is key, but there's quite a few assumptions that you can use in terms of government figures and things. So, there are options there. But that's fantastic, Katy. Thank you for shedding some of your insights on your experiences with the bike hire schemes that you've run at the university over the past couple of years, and the plans for taking this out to businesses in the city of Worcester, and the benefits that will have. And hopefully someone listening to this may well want to implement the perfect plan, not just in the city of Worcester, but across all of Worcestershire, and achieve a true modal shift with public transport as well. Fantastic. Thank you for your time today, Katy.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.